My name is Kusum Athukorala and I am a researcher and activist and an academic. Sometimes I find it difficult to understand what I am doing at a given moment, so I like to say I am hydraheaded. I have different persona. One of these persona feed into the other. I think that it is really important that I earlier had a background in teaching language and literature, because I believe that that is the foundation of understanding society. I also believe that right now my advocacy role is very important, because in many places, not only in Sri Lanka, the water issue is becoming more and more critical, and we need to understand that unless we talk about water all the time, unless we really push this, and sometimes to the detriment of people understanding or trying to think what we are doing and what we are trying to be. I have been called Jala Rakusa as well, a water demon, but I think that this is part of what I would want to do. Unfortunately, I not been very successful in getting people involved, because if I had been, there would be no water problems in Sri Lanka. The development activities of ancient Sri Lanka and the ancient kings of Sri Lanka recognize very strongly the principle of coexistence between man and nature. Most of the irrigation systems will have this little tag written on somewhere on them. The irrigation systems are for the livelihood of the people, but it also says for the benefit of the country and out of compassion for all living creatures. It also underlines the importance of looking at all development as something which benefits nature and all beings. The Mahavansa, the premier historical chronicle in Sri Lanka, enunciates the principle of common property resources, equity of access, and state trusteeship, not ownership. O great king, the birds of the air and the beasts have an equal right to move and move about in any part of the land as thou. The land belongs to the people and all living beings. Thou art only the guardian of it. And this was in 223 BC. This also comes to a time where we are having a lot of debate about elephant corridors. It's World Water Day, and when World Water Day in Sri Lanka comes, we also make the reference, unfailing reference I should say, to Parakram Bahu the Great. What does Parakram Bahu the Great tell us about water? Apart from being a person who is extremely well known, extremely famous for all the tanks and irrigation systems that he built, but his little saying is something that is available on every document which is presented for World Water Day. In such a country, let not even a small quantity of water obtained by rain go to the sea without benefiting man. Unfortunately, though this principle underlines the importance of saving water, using water, conserving water, in many situations it seems to be only something which comes on World Water Day. So how can we make this principle of saving water, conserving water more applicable to the day-to-day water security issues that this country is suffering more and more in a situation exacerbated by climate change? We are in a situation where we oscillate between droughts and floods. The last 6 months we have been having unceasing floods, but then we come into droughts. And when the droughts come, we are not sure whether we are going to have a breather with the monsoon rains, or are we heading into a mega drought? Are we prepared for a mega drought? Are we understanding the need for conserving water wherever we have it by human intervention? Are we looking at conserving water in the upper catchments? If you take the central highlands, it is the water tower of Sri Lanka, and it needs immediate urgent attention in looking and saving water. Water is not only the water that we get from the irrigation systems or from the water board pipes. We are also looking at springs. We are looking at little catchments. We are looking at what we call the wells, the peel. Every one of these sources of water is going to be important, especially when we are having a situation. We are going inexorably into water shortages. Water shortages are not rare now, they are becoming more and more frequent. Even in places where we have tap water, where the occupants and the people have no access to other sources of water, we do not have 24/7 water all the time for everyone. I have had multiple careers and multiple lives as a university lecturer, as a researcher, as an activist. And one of the most important activities that I have taken on as a researcher is the pioneering study on gender and irrigation in 1993-1996. When I first went into this area, very few women worked as irrigation researchers. And very few women were also in the water sector as irrigation managers, irrigation engineers or water board engineers. So it was a time that it was globally, we were looking at the importance of gendered issues and whether having women in the water sector was more important because they were the conduit of information, the conduit of access to community women. The role of women in water management, especially in the communities, in the community level, was becoming to be more and more recognized within this period of 1999 up to 2025. What we had done at that point is not to go into quantitative studies, and I think this is very important. We did qualitative research. Field work following 90 families for 3 years, that is 6 cultivation seasons. And that made a huge change in what we saw as actual, what do women do? Because when I first went, it was, oh, women don't do anything very much. Even the women themselves said, oh no, we are not doing anything. But I found out that they are working sometimes 16 hours a day and that they actually do irrigation. If I can give you this little example of a dry zone system where the technical staff said women don't irrigate, and certainly women don't irrigate at night. Myself and my team, who are all women, found that they do irrigate at night with certain safeguards, and they do irrigate in a very different way. I found that they were giving more water to their neighbors, sharing water, getting that principle of sharing water, which is so important in our historical context. After some time I asked, how is it that you are sending more water on than maybe your husband? And she had a very interesting story. She said, if my neighbor's child is hungry, I have to feed them. So it is better that I share more water and let them feed themselves. So that is not only altruism, it is also a lot of self-interest. Sharing of water leads to more harmony, and our ancient irrigation practices also have this principle of harmony. We have the principle of Betma. In a dry season, in a dry zone system, the people who have fields in the lower end will be sharing fields and water at the upper end. So the tail enders are also looked after. Very soon after World Water Day will come the National New Year, the Sinhala and Tamil New Year for Sri Lanka. In the olden days, one of the most important traditions that the housewife would carry out for the new year is Ganudenu with the well, the transaction with the well. The housewife would put in a little token which has a coin, a piece of charcoal, and to the well. That would symbolize the most important transaction with water. But now, if you are in an urban situation, what do? Do we put this to the tap? Or is there some kind of other different solution that we can think of? Because in a sense, this little token of appreciation for what the well provides for us gives us harmony with water. It is not just a funny thing that your grandmother used to do. It symbolizes the importance of the fact that your life is so intrinsically tied up with water. So I hope that at some point somebody will invent some activity which would be doing this ganudenu with water. Maybe the younger people would go out and do a transaction with if you don't have a well, with a river or a wetland, or with maybe a pond. If we read the newspaper, or if we watch TV or social media, we have many examples of water pollution coming in from different parts of the country. We are talking about fecal pollution in rivers, in ponds, in wetlands. We are talking about industrial pollution. Earlier we had a situation where the Coca-Cola factory was involved. We have situations in Ratupaswala where the water pollution led to people being shot. We have had so many issues related to dumping of fecal matter in Maoya. Unfortunately, one of the politicians related was even videoed emptying his gully sucker into Maoya. And we have all along, invisible because nobody takes note of it, rivers being polluted by urban development. If you go up Nanuoya in Pilimatalawa, one would wonder where the sewage pits are emptied. Why is it that we think that a wetland, a pond, a river, a drain is the most convenient and useful place to dump our waste, our sewage? There is something which is extremely difficult for me to understand, because we have not only gone on doing this for a long time, we have had streams of administrators and politicians who have closed their eyes blindly, mindlessly to the situation of everyday, day-to-day, 24/7 pollution. It is understood that many of the sewage pits in Colombo are directed illegally, illicitly to the stormwater drain, causing absolute asuchi puravaraya as when it starts raining. I do think that we have to look at this World Water Day, especially for the young people who are going to be suffering because of the problems created by our generation. We need to give them a way out. We need to give them a situation where they can make life better for themselves, because pollution is not going to be improved if you keep on blindly doing these ostrich solutions for this man-made problem. When we think of water security and water availability, it is really important that we, and especially the young people of this country, look at the catchments. The catchment conservation is really important. About 2 weeks ago, I was on a field trip in the upper catchment of Maoya, and the river was so dry. I was wondering how we could manage to service the 35 intakes all along Maoya coming down to Negombo. We cannot have a situation where we think that water is something which comes out of a tap. Water, it's like your bank account. If you don't put money in your bank account, you won't get money, you can't withdraw money. So unless you conserve your catchments, especially your water tower, you're not going to be having water. So it is really useless, for people to be screaming about sending bowsers if you don't look after your water tower. And I think that is one place, one issue that I hope that all the young people will be identifying as a critical existential problem. It's going to be difficult to live if you do not look after your water tower. If you are going to do sand mining all the way up in your catchments, if you are going to be dumping all the plastics, all the polythene, all the sewage from around the river. Sri Lankan children learn about environment, but do they operationalize what they learn in the classrooms? Let me share with you a little program that happened in the wetlands of Colombo, where the children did a little role play, a little drama. And there was this very interesting situation of the child coming and telling the mother, "Amma, don't put your garbage and your plastic in the vela, in the wetlands. So children may be taught this in school, but they can't operationalize it in their own homes, in their community. Children are taught the principles of environment in schools, but they are unable to operationalize the principles of environment in their homes, in their communities, because there is no way that the waste which is collected can be disposed of in an appropriate manner. I have been rereading this very interesting book called When the Rivers Run Dry, and that is happening all over the world. It's certainly happening in certain parts of Sri Lanka. It's not only the rivers, it is also the ponds, the little pools which are running dry. So what happens when our water runs out? This need not happen if we change our mindset, divert a little from the Western science mode that in which we are working, hark back to the indigenous knowledge of our ancestors, our forefathers, and look at how the new systems can incorporate ancient learning. We need to have new priorities to deal with the current situation, and these new priorities very often mean that we have to go back to older indigenous systems. And who is going back to them? I think that this is where I'd like to note that the Women for Water Partnership, of which I am a member, also looks at women and youth working together as catalysts for change, as carriers of new thinking, of revised thinking. In the current situation, we have more emphasis on youth, availability for the voice of youth, but to a certain extent I am thinking, looking back on the 25 years of activism on gender and women and water, I am looking back and seeing that maybe some of the tokenism that we experience as trying to get women into the water sector is now being operationalized in getting youth to the water sector. So we need to look at situations, modes of thought, changing women and youth from being passive tokens available in many of the conferences that we go to, into people who would be doing serious decision making, who would be able to go and inform the current situation to the community, to the government, to the institutions, as well as make sure that their voice is heard. The voice of the youth should not be limited to mere participation, to mere tokenism, because if there is a crisis in water, we are the generation who created it, and they are the generation who will have to suffer and remedy it. In order to understand situations and problems, we have to spend some time, energy and resources mapping them. So Sri Lanka Water Partnership, of which I am chair, has started an activity called Water Landscapes. When you look at a map, do you see railways, roads, hospitals and trains? Why not we make a water landscape which will show us the river, the peeler, the ulpat, the springs, and maybe a wetland. And we start to think and re-visualize and review our lives as something, as a being which is working and living in a water landscape. When we talk about World Water Day, I think we also need to talk not only about knowledge, but also about wisdom. Wisdom is something which is acquired and transferred through generations. When we talk of transferring knowledge from one generation to the other, the conduit which comes to my mind is women and youth. Here I would like to look back at my great mentor, Professor Marlene Falkenmark, who said, if you want to understand how transmission of knowledge goes, go and look at the Stone Age, how people transferred knowledge and who transferred knowledge. Marlene, thank you very much. Intergenerational equity, which we all prize, we should all work towards, is the transfer of knowledge from one generation to the other. And that transfer of knowledge only happens when we look at young people and we accept them for the important role that they have to undertake in taking on the issues of the water sector, in correcting the wrongs of the water sector, and also in looking at the indigenous knowledge, the ancestral knowledge, and making it useful and relevant to the modern day society. World Water Day is where we have to rethink, rewire and reset the way we talk about water, we deal water, we save water, we preserve water, especially how we work with the three key partners: the communities, the civil society and the state institutions. So if we have some activity going which will bring these three stakeholders together, because water management, water problems are not talking about water confrontations, it is about consultation and consensus. Then we come to the most important thing of who does what. Intergenerational equity is important because we are not going to do anything without the youth, without the children. They are our future and they have to understand what is it that needs to be done. And we, in the senior people, the researchers, the stakeholders in the state, government, institutions, they have to understand what is it that they have to do, to give. Water is power. If you can give a little bit of your power of decision making to the youth, you may understand that, you know, we have a different way of thinking. The young people will come up with solutions which is not in our generation. If you can do that, I believe that this is important. If you can think that children who are doing environmental studies will be empowered to go out and look at ecosystems, look at water in the ecosystem, how it operates, where the water comes, where it is clean, where it is not so clean, where it is polluted, they may come up with the solutions. And they will also be give pressure to their own fathers, mothers and communities not to do certain things which will pollute water for the children. If we can understand this transfer of knowledge, which is important to come from one generation to the other, about the different uses of water, the different ways of managing water, the different ways of looking after your water resources, I think this is the day on which we should start doing that important activity. Try to understand that water is always power. Those who have the power over water are never going to give it up willingly. But we have to empower the young people to make the changes which are needed to have water security for all. One of the first programs undertaken by the Sri Lanka Water Partnership in the year 2002 was in Akurana, a community in central province of Sri Lanka. And I would like to share the booklet that we did on Akurana for the young people of Akurana. I think that a lot of our advocacy and awareness has to be capacity building for young people, especially young water professionals and school children. There is also this little message which comes to my mind, where we did a program with the Girl Guides, and the Girl Guides went and did a training for preschoolers. And one of the little preschoolers came to her teacher and said, you know, teacher, I told my father to close the tap while shaving and my father scolded me. The next day when they had a program for parents, the little child dragged her father and to the teacher and said, teacher, please tell my father to close the tap while shaving. See, this is what she had been taught. And if we can instill the principles of good water management at an early age, children will absorb it. Children will live with it for all their lives. So I think that we really need to do advocacy and training, awareness training for the younger generation.